Good midday to you and shalom. This is the midday moment for June the 11th, 2026 here on Following Him, the Disciple Life. Just want to take a moment to reflect from a disciple perspective on the verdict with Carmelo Anthony. Obviously, I'm not the first person to comment on this, and we're not going to get into the particulars with this. I will say, to give you a heads up, where I'm coming from in viewing this, from everything I can see, the verdict, which is that this young man is guilty of illicitly unaliving Austin Metcalf. And I'm trying to put this in such a way so that the reach doesn't get limited here with some of these apps and sites. They're a little funny on certain words that apparently you can't use, even though they're not curse words. And the other way of saying it, everybody knows what we mean. But regardless, that he did illicitly unalive this young man, that he was not justified in doing it. There is a reasonable expectation of self-defense, even through lethal means. That is something that is recognized in every state in the United States and generally around the world. Some states are not as consistent with that and logical with that. However, this was Texas. Texas is definitely a place that is known for recognizing the right to self-defense and such. From everything I can see, that this was not a case of that at all. This was a case of retaliation because he, for whatever reason, felt he needed to act to assert his authority or his strength or what have you, and did this horrendous act. Now, we look at this without getting into all the racial component that some people are putting on this. I will say this: when you automatically assume that somebody can't be guilty because of their skin color, that is racist. Just think about it a moment. If you assume, well, they must not be guilty because this one person was this skin color and this other person with this skin color, how is that not racist? Somebody having darker skin does not make them incapable of committing horrendous crime, just as it does not make them incapable of doing tremendous good. So you have a choice either way. And a couple scriptural thoughts. Now, Deuteronomy 32, verse 4, in speaking of Yahweh God, the Lord, God, He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all His ways are justice. A God of truth, and without injustice. Righteous and upright is He. Somebody being convicted and punished for taking someone's life, this would be justice. And this would be in accordance with who God is. That would be my view. And so in that, I am somberly thankful. Now, let me explain why I put it that way, because I do think we need to be careful. Because when we look at this, the temptation can be, oh, I'm glad he got his, and all this sort of thing. And while that might be understandable, particularly if there have been some cases where someone was let free that shouldn't have been, and that sort of thing, and that might weigh on your mind. But there's another principle to consider, and that is one we've mentioned before in Proverbs 24, verse 17. Got fighting some bugs out here. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. Now, this is with somebody that is your enemy. Now, none of us were faced with Carmelo. None of us were faced with that situation. But yeah, even if he were our direct enemy, we shouldn't be rejoicing when he falls. In fact, it goes on, lest the Lord see it and it displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. In other words, there is a place for someone falling providentially. And in this case, the governing authorities have stepped in, and they're carrying out the role that, when I read Romans 13, that is really their primary role, to bear the sword, to enact justice, to avenge. But we're not supposed to look at that and throw a party about it. Be somberly thankful. Be grateful that God's will is done. Be grateful that justice is carried out, because that is good for society. Pray for Carmelo. It's a troubled young man. From what I can see, it looks like there's a lot of troubling attitudes and mindsets in the family, from things I've heard them say. And of course, pray for the family of those that have lost their son to this atrocious act. But regard it thankfully, but somberly. It's not something to throw a party about. 2 young men's lives have been ruined. One has just been outright taken. The other, for at least 17 years, is gone. So that it's going to be a somber thing. It's going to be a hard thing with this. So let's regard it with the seriousness it deserves, and let's be careful in our attitude about it, that we don't regard it flippantly or something just to to have a big smile and yay, let's have let's have a party over it. No, God's justice has been done, but let's be careful about our attitude in regards to God's justice being done. You have a good rest of the day. Lord willing, Thursday Thoughts should be up here in just a little bit. And shalom.